Hello, everyone. Good morning. I am Evelyn Farkas. I'm the Executive Director of the McCain Institute. I want to start by giving a huge thank you to Baravan Orokulu, who is our colleague here, who has worked tirelessly for almost a decade now, I believe, running our Human Rights Defenders program. I think everyone in the room knows her, and there are 88 people around the world who have been helped by her directly, who have been rescued, human rights defenders that the McCain Institute has assisted. 88 people from 42 different countries. And that's really just the beginning of the McCain Institute's work to help human rights defenders, because of course Baravan and her programming helps people get out of harm's way. They continue onward and they remain in our network. We have a human rights and democracy program here at the Institute. We work with global leaders all over the world who are also, many of them, at the forefront of democracy and human rights. We are lucky to have also with us here today one of our most favorite and cherished board members, one of our original board members, Elisa Massimino, who has a long resume, a long and distinguished resume in the human rights field. She now runs the Human Rights Center, I believe it's called, at Georgetown University Law School. But she has been running nonprofits in Washington with global reach for decades now. She was also very close to Senator McCain and really made a big mark, frankly, on our nation's policies and the world through her work with him, preventing and stopping, frankly, the mistreatment, the torture of detainees, and the entire U.S. policy, which, of course, at the time was very misguided. But Senator McCain was one of the leading lights with Elisa's active advice and consultation to stop all of that. And that is something that we are very proud of. Of course, the United States continues to have to work to live up to its ideals every day, but one of the things that we appreciate about our country is that we do try. We do try earnestly and honestly, and we do everything we can in the name of Senator McCain here at the Institute to make sure that we are working hard for individual human rights defenders. Senator McCain understood that one person could make a tremendous difference in their community and throughout the world. He did that. And people like Jamila Afghani, who we have the very distinct pleasure of having here with us today, do that every day as well. So we are here today for a half a day, roughly, of conversation. Really, it's a chance to shore up our community, to see one another and to exchange information about the threats that we face and how we might work on them together in the future. So the first panel will be some of these very dedicated human rights advocates, people who the McCain Institute has had the pleasure of supporting, and you will hear from them briefly, or in a few minutes. The second panel will be representatives from support organizations who have helped our human rights defenders, who have worked with the McCain Institute, supported our work, for whom we are deeply grateful. And then we will have an off-the-record conversation, and we are very grateful again to have Elisa Massimino to help us with that as well. This is all being live streamed and I believe recorded, so people can tune in at their leisure. But I really want to underscore how important this work is. If human rights defenders are not protected, if human rights are not protected, then everything we are fighting for, whether it's rule of law and commerce, in the United States and around the world, whether it's our domestic democracy or democracy in places where they are striving for it, it will not have a chance. The defending human rights is important in countries that are also not democracies, in autocracies around the world. The one thing that the international community agreed on was sanctity of borders and the rights of individuals. Those were the two principles that undergird our current international system, which is, of course, under direct assault by state and non-state actors all around the world. So today, before we begin our panels, I want to call everyone to reflect on Senator McCain's inspiring reminder, and this is in his words. He said, quote, "Human rights exist above the state and beyond history. They cannot be rescinded by one government any more than they can be granted by another. They inhabit the human heart And from there, though they may be abridged, they will never be extinguished. And I think that's a really important thing to remember. We will have to fight for human rights, but they will remain in the hearts of every human. And so as we support and celebrate the defenders' achievements and recommit to our shared cause, let's please ensure that every voice is heard and no one is ever silenced. To all the defenders here and online, remember, you have a special place in our hearts and you will always find an ally here at the McCain Institute. So thank you very much.
Mics? No, you just have the handheld. Okay. It's mine on. Okay. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm really, really happy to be here with all of you, but I am particularly happy to be here with all of you. So welcome to our panel discussing the realities of defending human rights at home and abroad. We're going to be hearing from some of the most inspiring activists we could be hearing from. Just to give everybody a little bit of the structure, we're going to do a quick round of introductions, and then we're going to hear everyone's stories, and then we're going to have some time for questions and answers. The goal is a conversation, a chance to learn. So without any further ado, I'll start by just saying I'm Jenna Anderson. I'm the Associate Director at the American Bar Association Center for Human Rights. We have a program about a decade old supporting human rights defenders through pro bono legal services. So we've been working with activists around the world for many years, and increasingly we're working with activists that have been forced into exile. So this is very near and dear to our hearts. So now I'm just going to ask each of you to just quickly introduce yourselves, and then we'll come back to Wei Wei to actually start the presentations. I think if you just press the button on the microphone, you'll be able to just talk.
Hello. Is it working? Oh, great. Hi, everybody. Good morning. My name is Wei Wei Nu. I am a Burmese human rights activist, a Rohingya ethnic background. I run an organization called Women's Peace Network. We work on human rights documentation, advocacy, peace building, and youth development and leadership building. And I've been exiled for the past 4 or 5 years. So glad to be here to celebrate today and discuss about our challenges and experiences and opportunity we experience. Thanks.
Jamila? I think we have to pass. Yeah. Thank you.
Nice meeting you all, and good morning to everyone. I'm Jamila Afghani. I'm from Afghanistan. Currently, I'm working as a vice president in the International Board of Women International League for Peace and Freedom. At the same time, I'm also running an organization in Afghanistan and many other engagement. We may talk later on that. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to welcome you all in my indigenous greetings. Mayambu Taramna Okchiri. It means I pay my obeisance to each and every one present in this room and joining online. I also give my respects to the land acknowledgement of the Piscataway and Nacotchtank people who have been living in this state region for centuries. My name is Bina Nepram. I'm an indigenous scholar and a human rights defender from the state of Manipur in northeast of India, which is bordering Burma. I come from a place where you will not have heard that there are conflicts, but I come from a forgotten war zone. I'm here and delighted to be with my sisters here. I've co-founded the Manipur Women Gun Survivors Network in the year 2007 and launched the Northeast India Women Initiative for Peace to ensure that women are in decision making in conflict zones in my part of the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and so now, and just so everybody knows, what we've asked is for our panelists as experts to tell the story of the work and also touch on why are they here? Why are they not in the places where they've been defending human rights for so long? And what have the challenges been in continuing that work? And after that, we'll be able to have a great discussion. So we'll start with Wei Wei.
I think that's a great question to start where, why are we here, right? Why are we not in the places that where we're supposed to be? I was just in New York celebrating the 75 years anniversary of UDHR, just like here, and also participating at some of the side events alongside the Assembly of State Parties, talking about atrocity prevention, genocide preventions, and protections of human rights. Little to none that has come up with the about the role of human rights defenders themselves, frontline defenders themselves, and the critical role that they play, and how important it is to have protection and support system for these human rights defenders to be able to continue drive the human rights agenda in their local communities and protect people. It is extremely sad for me personally to be here while my community is suffering in my own country and in the region, and where often many of us feel the most effective when we are in our own country or with our own community. As you become an exile, you feel even though you may have enormous impact or effect that you can create by being outside, there is always value with living inside and outside, but still you would always feel like there is you're not being effective. So there's a lot to talk about, but before talking about that, maybe I'd like to share a little bit about my story. I was just 18 years old. I come from when I was arrested with my father, my mom, my sister, and my brother, because my father was a politician and political activist during the previous dictatorship, military dictatorship in Burma. We spent 7 years in the prison. We were finally released in 2012. And ever since I become an activist to promote and protect human rights and democracy. And with the hope that the country has opened up, there is opportunity to promote democracy itself. But then what I realized, my community and many other communities in Burma, especially ethnic minorities, were facing many forms of persecutions. In the case of my community, Rohingya genocide. So I needed to step up, and I basically founded my organization, started to mitigate hate, racism, discriminations, and the false narrative that has been put forward against my community, which eventually led to commissions of genocide in 2016 and 17. However, I feel like I did my part, and I tried my best by bringing different communities together, try to mitigate some of the hate, as well as raise awareness about the serious situations in the country among the populations inside Burma, as at the same time doing informing international community, raising awareness internationally, doing advocacy to hold the Burmese military leaders accountable for their commissions of genocide, crimes against humanity, and other heinous crimes against the Rohingya people and other. And that's how my journey has begun. And that's how I was targeted by, at that time, before the military coup in 2021, not only by the military leaders themselves, but also civilian government, which was trying to undermine the seriousness of the crimes that was happening in their own country under their own rule, while claiming democracy transition was happening. So basically, a lot of the many leaderships even among the democracy how do I say, the Democratic Party or ruling civilian government itself was denying the genocide and undermining the genocide. And deep down, as a human rights activist, I believe that we cannot achieve democracy without addressing human rights, fundamental and serious situations of the human rights in our society. And I continued to march, and I was basically targeted, and I had to leave. I came out to study, and with the hope that I'll be, many of you know, with the hope that I'll be able to go, and I never wanted to surrender my passport, still holding it. But then the challenges I faced over these years, over the past 3-4 years, has been undescribable. It's not only that it's mentally affected for individual, for me as a person, as a human rights defender, but also it's affect in your ability to work, ability to communicate, ability to make impact. It's also impact your health. And in addition to that, I constantly face challenge to secure my visa or to get a documentation so that I can be legal in this country. From those logistical challenges to financial challenges that I face, how do you secure to live in this country, which is so expensive, right? For instance, the income or the salary that we would get in Burma may not be even used for a week of expenses here, right? So it's a constant challenge in many levels that I have to experience and continue to survive and struggle. And I think there are so many details that I can go in, and maybe in the next round how we can address some of these challenges. But I think I am one of the strong and resistant and resilient person to adapt the situation, to accept the situations, and to overcome and to continue to march. So I still feel like I'm making so much impact and so much change for the country. I continue to work for my organizations as well as continue to do a lot of engagement with the U.S., in the U.S. itself, and with the Congress, with the government, as well as with the UN, trying to push the policy for better policy for Burma with every opportunity that I can grab. But I do not believe that a lot of the exile community, a lot of the human rights defenders who had to leave the country are able to basically remain strong and resilient and continue to march. And it is a shame, because at the end of the day, it is the human rights defenders themselves who change the society, who change the systems, and who often have a bigger visions for their society and for the world. So I think it is a shame that there is not many practical support system or sustained support systems available for the human rights defenders till today. There are many programs I have seen, but these sometimes it doesn't actually match or met the need of the individual human rights defenders. So I'll stop here, and hopefully we can talk more. Thanks.
Thank you. I have one quick follow-up question before we go to Jamila, because you said very quickly a very key thing, which was that at some point you realized you needed to leave, and so you left, you said, to study. But I'd be curious, in just short, how did you assess that you had reached that moment, that you needed to leave? And then how did you then find the resources of the support to leave? Because that's a pretty key moment. I think we're all aware of a lot of defenders who don't yet have that access. But
yeah, it was after 2017 clearance operations, genocidal attacks against the Rohingya, and it was in 2018. I have received, I was doing advocacy at the UN UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, we were doing advocacy on establishment of commissions of inquiry. As a compromise, we got international fact-finding missions on Myanmar. So basically, there was a period of active advocacy to get some level of some types of accountability mechanisms on Burma. And I was engaging with a lot of embassies domestically, as well as UN offices, etc. So around that time, I have received so many threats by the military intelligence, phone calls, emails, surveillance. They would come in front of our office. They would come and visit our office and ask what we are doing, what kind of meetings are happening here. And if I travel outside of the country, they would come when I would be coming back. And in addition to that, I was receiving online constant threat on social media through messages, through Facebook messages, through Viber, which is a messaging app, and different other apps, as well as their public campaign against me, like calling me out with very nasty thing, and a lot of like, doxing and all of these things. I did care very little about the online thing, but I was worried about the physical threat that I was receiving. And at some point, I didn't feel like if I go out, for example, I wasn't going out alone too much, but when I go back from my office to my home, I didn't feel like I was safe. So I couldn't even look back because I was having fear of being attacked by mob or by targeted by the security forces. So that's how that was a few months of my experience, and it was a friend of us called Miss Debbie Stoddard, a good friend of us. She lives in Thailand, Bangkok, and then I remember she visiting our office. She was visiting our office and sit in front of me and basically make me understand how dangerous it is for me to live inside country at that situation at that moment. She was like very experienced human rights defender for Burma. She's been working on Burma for so many years, since 1988 revolutions in Burma. So she was basically explaining her experience, and she was convincing me to leave the country. And then at that moment, it's clicked me, and I went back home and I explained my parents that I needed to leave, and they were like, okay, then if you need to leave tomorrow. So I just bought the ticket immediately, and I came to Thailand, and I stayed at her office, basically, and I applied for a school at UC Berkeley, and I was admitted after a couple of months. So I was able to come and do my school at UC Berkeley. I got half scholarship, and I had to pay the rest, which is expensive in UC Berkeley, to do an LLM program. And I somehow managed to pay the tuition fee. And I remember Freedom House at that time provided me 3 months support to live in school. So that was helpful, although it doesn't cover the entire year, but it covers some part. And then I constantly had to look for resources, reach out to the different organizations and groups to be able to survive in this country. But yeah, even people like me who have some level of outreach and exposure find difficult to reach out to people. It's not easy to talk about support. It's easy to talk about the situations in your country, the cause that you believe in. It's easy to talk about your advocacy, but it's not often for us easy to talk about support. So I find it very humiliating, very uneasy, very difficult to constantly looking for support, and while securing visa and all of it. But even people like me who have some level of exposure and publicity find it difficult. You can imagine how it would be difficult for the people, for human rights defenders who are not as visible as myself.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, just to say, I'm very glad and proud that you came to this country and chose to get an LLM in one of our schools, but I wish that it was not at so much personal cost, obviously. And I do think I'm already hearing ways that we could all be doing a little bit better just from having heard that story. And thank you very much for sharing, because that was incredible. And now let's hear from Jamila.
Oh, well, my story is very long because this is sixth time that I'm becoming refugee. I think it's better that I should also reflect a little bit about my personal life, how I became an activist. I was daughter of a rich man, a tribal leader in Afghanistan from Ghazni province. My father did not believe in education, or none of my sisters could go to school. And my brothers were also thinking that they have enough money, there is no need of going to school. So education was like something not important in our environment. Thank God I got the disability. I got polio, and most of the time I was unable to play outside, and I was a sensitive person from the beginning, so I was getting sick very often. Then one of the doctors suggested to my father to enroll me in school to become a little bit busy. So that was a miracle in my life when I was enrolled in school. So of course I was unable to play or do some other things. So my whole world became my books, my pencil colors and everything, like I was busy with that. So usually I was getting a lot of good marks, and because of good intelligent student, I was getting a lot of attention from my teachers, from my principal. So everybody was really supporting me. So when I was in grade 3, Russian invasion came in Afghanistan. They invaded Afghanistan, and my family, which was like very traditional family, and Russian was also imposing their own mindset, mentality on people. And my uncle was cursing my father that I am a grown-up girl. I was in grade 4. I remember it very properly. And my uncle was telling my father to kick me out of school. Otherwise we were becoming defamed, accepting the norms and regulation of communist regime. Then I was begging my father, just 1 year more, please, just 1 year more. I was at grade 7. We had no other alternative. We had to escape to Pakistan. We are in Pakistan. We were not living in refugee camp because financially we were sound. So we had a house in the city. And it was good that I could go to school. But that time we were living in the area where one of the famous war Mujahideen leader, Ustad Rabbani, was living in the same community. And their soldier, everybody, the guard was there. So my brother and family were saying, now you shouldn't go to school because these people are standing on the way and it's not good. But I had that passion for education because I could see my world in that. So I had no other interest in any other thing. So I tried to make strong connection with my sister-in-laws, and I established a good relationship with them, and I was teaching her children, and I was also doing some other stuff for them. And in return, I was requesting them to support me for my education. So usually, then I started going to back to school, and I was attending English classes and computer classes because it was main city and everything was nearby. And my sister-in-laws were supporting me, like when my brother were coming, where is Jamila? They were saying, she's in the toilet, she's taking shower. Or sometimes they were saying, she's sick, she's sleeping, don't disturb her. So in this way, I completed my education. Then I got my master classes in international relations. When I was studying international relations in Peshawar University, and I was reading more about the world policy regarding Afghanistan and the situation than uh, that personal experience I had and the theory we were reading. So it became very strong in my essence of my life. Then I start my social work. I start working in the refugee camps for women. I remember in one of the day, in the first round of Taliban government, and one day 36 women and children died in the camp because of lack of food and heat, and they were migrated to Pakistan. At the same time, there was a very heavy drought that year. So from that time, I started my social work. We start combining, collecting food and medicine, money from the city and delivering those aid to the camps for women and children. Although my mother was telling that I feel really ashamed that just as like a beggar, you're walking on the doors and collecting their old clothes and old stuff. Like we feel very bad, but I was thinking like this was the only way that I could my sisters and families in the camps. But thank God, when we did that, and I had my disability from the beginning, and interestingly, four other girls were also having different kind of disability, and we, with all those disability, we were able to reach to the camps and support people. Then the life in the camp was very difficult. People were facing so many problems, and every camp was leading by one of the Mujahideen leaders, and they had their own restrictions. And in Shamshadu camp and other camps, education was nothing among women. Like women were illiterate, young girls. They were unable to go to school, and they had no opportunity. Then I start Islamic education classes in the camp, volunteer for the girls there. And after passage of time, like every time, like they were asking for some more additional things like literacy program, some other programs. So this way I was working. So 9/11 happened. Then situation was changed, and I got the opportunity to go back to Afghanistan. There I started again my center. Unfortunately, because of civil war inside Afghanistan, the period when I was in Pakistan. Believe me, the day I went to Kabul, all the Kabul city was just like a destroyed city. Windows were broken, walls were full of bullets. There was no shop. Even like I was calling my family back to Pakistan that I arrived safely, and we were using that handle machine to call the family. Like it was very chaotic situation. But still, I start my work there. I established a literacy program, peace education program for women. Through support of Relief International, we immediately opened schools for 2,000 women and girls. And that time also Taliban didn't allow girls to go to school. And we had catch-up program for those girls that in short time could get those lessons to be able to go to school again, to compensate the years they lost it. So it was good. I was doing good things, and then I realized that my work needs to expand in the other provinces. It was only in Kabul. Then I went to my own province from where my parents belong, in Ghazni province. I start working there, but there I faced a lot of resistance from Islamic leaders like mullahs, the community, and they were propagating after me that she is a bad Muslim woman. She's traveling alone to foreign countries. She is working in the office with men. So they were giving me a lot of threats and warnings, but still, like I was trying my best to work. And I remember one of the imam who was like talking always against me. I tried to bring him in a conversation, because every time, like, as much I was working, so as Friday sermon was giving a lot of impact to close down my centers or to stop girls coming to my center. Then, with support of some family friends, I invited that guy, and he came, and like, he was covering his face, and he was saying that I'm so embarrassed to come to visit you, the women I hate from from core of my heart, but still I'm here to meet you. Then I said, my brother, always you are talking that not a good Muslim. So if today you prove that I'm a bad woman and whatever I'm doing that is against Islam, at the moment I will give the keys of my center to your hand, and I will live here forever. So when I start some recitation from Holy Quran and Hadith, so that guy was shocked, because my knowledge was a little bit more than his knowledge. And he turned and he said, oh, I didn't know that you know this much about Islam. Then I introduced myself that I'm daughter of this guy, who my father was also well known there. So then that guy was changed. And I found that after change of behavior of that guy, the community mentality was also changed. I received a lot of support. The one center I had there, it changed to 36 centers, and one only in one provinces. But unfortunately, because of insecurity in those areas, we were unable to continue, and I was receiving a lot of death threats, and like every day we were receiving death threat. Then I had to leave Afghanistan for some time in Turkey until the situation calmed down. Then in 2015, I received an offer from the previous government to join them as a deputy minister for the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs, where I was in charge of disability section, pension money. As when money is issue, there is corruption. Of course, in Afghanistan, it was big issue. But thank God I played very important role in reduction of corruption and cutting so many policies to stop corruption in the system. And I brought changes in bank system of payment for the beneficiaries. So I was receiving a lot of the threat from mafia groups. And they were saying that the spring of water that we were taking benefit for many, many years, you have stopped that on us. And they were saying your debt is just 10,000 Afghani with a sticky bomb we can put in your car and you can blow up. But still I did resistance. After 2 years, then I had to resign because of a lot of pressure on my health, and also they were trying to kidnap my children from the school. Then I had to get out of Afghanistan for some time. Then I was sometime in Bosnia Herzegovina, sometime in Turkey. Then I was sometime in Germany. Then I went back to Afghanistan, another chapter. Then I was working there a lot on the peace building process. That time the peace process has started. So we were engaged in the peace process very fiercely and very tirelessly. We were working, and we were hopeful that with the peace process there will be long-lasting peace in Afghanistan. Then unfortunately, with the wrong decision of NATO and USA for quick, unplanned evacuation from Afghanistan, they put all of us again in a very bad situation. The question you were asking, that why we are here, it was one of the reasons. And I was always saying that I will be the last person who might leave Afghanistan. But unfortunately, I become one of those who were trying to get out of Afghanistan quicker, because the government collapsed. There was nobody there. And my children were very young, and all my family was at risk because of me, because of my work. And everybody was saying, just go away because of you, we all suffer. And without any plan and with very heavy heart, like we had to evacuate. And the crowd in the airport, you know about that. It was very chaotic situation with this disability and young children. With all those difficulty, I reached to the gate where U.S. soldiers were waiting, and I had the visa support letter from 11 countries. I was yelling and I was shouting, "This is Jamila Afghani, this is my letter." And the security guard on the gate, they were not listening. And the crowd of thousands of people were coming after me as a flood. I fall down. My children were about to be suffocated. My shoulder, my arm, everything was harmed. But they didn't allow us. So I have very bad memories from the US soldier on that time. But thank God a few friends came and they took me out of that area. Then so many other times we tried. Then I had a colleague at Norway embassy, Norway ambassador. I called him and I said, "This is the situation. What should I do?" Then he helped me through some other guys to get out of the airport. The sewage, which was full of dirty water, that was the last option that we could get out of that. So, and others could go down in that sewage, but me with this disability, it was really difficult. But there was no other option. So my brother, who was holding me on his shoulders and to cross me from the sewage. And I was thinking, for God's sake, others are going to the sewage of dirty water, maybe up to their knees. If I fall down from the shoulder of my brother, so my mouth, my head, everything will be in that dirty sewage. So, with great difficulty, thank God I was able to cross that sewage. And believe me, next day on the same spot, on the same timing, there was explosion that many people were killed. When I look back, then I say, thank God I was one day earlier, that today at least my children are safe. Then I was in North Norway, where 6 months was night, 6 months was day. And me with this disability was unable to walk on all those snows. And I was imprisoned for 6 months of snow. And I was saying, for God's sake, this is black and white city. On the surrounding white snow, the sky was black and there was nothing else. So it was a very difficult experience. Then I got some other connections in Canada. Then I came to Canada. Canada is a diverse country and it was good. It is good for us, but of course we are facing many other challenges. The challenges right now we are facing it is like cyber insecurity that I'm facing for the past 4 or 5 months. There is continuous cyber attack on me. My email is compromised 2 or 3 times. My money is robbed. And when I look back to the history of my email, that every minute from all around the world, attacks is going on my email. And it gives me a lot of tension about my own safety and security and about safety and security of my children. And for this environment, we are not familiar, we are not ready because it's very new context for us in this situation. And some of the donors and partners are thinking that when we are safe and in a safe country, the story is finished. No, I think the story starts again from zero with a new chapter that I have more than 25, 30 years of experience. Now that is not useful in the context of Canada. I'm no one. I have no recognition. My educational record is not acceptable in the context of Canada. I need to go again to school and get 1 or 2 years course, then I have to start works from some basic area that it's really difficult that I have been in different positions now to start from the position of shopkeeper and cleaner. It's really difficult for me. And I feel like the experience, not because that those are low paid job or something. No, I don't mean that. Because the experience I have, the experience, 20, 30 years of experience, where I should use that. So these are the challenges that right now I'm facing. I told you from the beginning, my story will be long, so I will stop here to not make bore the colleagues here.
Yeah, I would not have edited that. So thank you for telling your story. And I will say thank you also for mentioning your family and the impact this has had on them and the challenges that come with both your family who are there. I mean, that's the idea that your family is saying, we need you to leave, we're at risk too, but also that you're trying to navigate for your children as well, this transition and explain to them. So I think it's incredibly
My
helpful.
children were in a very young age, like they went to different countries with different schooling when the start of education was starting on them. So they learn a little bit Turkish, then a little bit of Norwegian, a little bit of Bosnian language, now English. So like one of my daughters is really facing challenges for catching up. My son, who wants to be a pilot, like he's facing a lot of burden on his education to catch up the scores he needs to be qualified. And sometimes my children, when they are talking about those horrible experiences we had, the kidnappers inside Afghanistan, the bomb blast every minute in Afghanistan, then all those trouble we went to in refugee life, not having money, not having shelter, not having enough resources. So sometimes my children says like, Mama, we are full of traumas. Then in order to change, I say like, you're part of history. You're those people who are experiencing history practically. So sometimes like I give them a little bit a twist in their mentality to not be overburdened. But of course it is having very bad impact. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Bina will hear from you, and then we'll have questions and answers. But
just take a moment to acknowledge the traumatic sharing of my two sisters, and to also know how strong you are to be here with all of us in spite of all the challenges that you have faced. The title says, Unsilenced, Empowering Human Rights Defenders in Exile. To be very honest, we three are not the only people who are in exile. We are exiled in today's world from peace. We are exiled from true democracies. And we are exiled from our humanity right now. I'm talking about 7 billion people on this planet. I do not feel that I'm in another country. The world is one earth. I've never, during my exile life, felt that I was away from home, but rather used this time to be able to do much more important work to defend our democracies, our human rights. I just wanted all of us to know this. We have let our tears, Sister Jamila, water the human spirit. We have let our separations from our families, our countries, and our community build a better community, which this world has lost. Our presence here and our absence has made this world a more connected world too. So in the snows of Norway, to the fall colors of East Coast, which we never grew up knowing, we have seen it all. So by the time we return home, we know we can go back to build stronger, more resilient communities than we left. With this, I will not speak about my personal life here, because for me and many of us who are here, if we were only thinking of ourselves, we wouldn't be exiled the way we are right now. If we have only thought about earning for ourselves and our families, we wouldn't be here. Some of us were mad enough to fight for our communities in very difficult circumstances, which have landed us where we are and continue to be targeted, as Sister said, even online. I come from the state of Manipur, which currently in Monday saw 13 massacres of young people as young as 16 and 17. The name Manipur, if you have not heard it before, it means land of jewels. It was an independent Asiatic nation state which joined the Union of India in 1949 under duress, which resulted in a political conflict which continues till today. As a result, we have 100,000 troops of the Indian Armed Forces. We have a martial law imposed on our people from the year 1958 till today. I grew up under a martial law in Manipur. So today, if you think India is the world's largest democracy, I call it democracy at gunpoint. I was born under a military curfew. And today, on 14th of December, we continue to face genocide. We continue to face armed atrocities in a manner that we have never seen before, that this year, on 3rd of May, 2023, over 200 innocent men, women, children were brutally killed in my home state, where we have several armed actors, violent extremist groups which has been cropped up and destroying our human rights, our right to life, and our peace away. In these circumstances, it is not about I as Bina Nepram, but what can we do as we, the community? The questions I ask: why are some conflicts known and why some conflicts are hidden? There are 30 known conflicts in the world, and there are 300 unreported conflicts in the world. Manipur is one of them. The silence of Manipur has led to more loss of lives of several ethnic, indigenous, minority communities. Over 70,000 of them are now in displaced camps, in 379 displaced camps in Mizoram, in Manipur, in Delhi, and even in Myanmar. Yet the world will not talk about this. So for some of us who are able to survive these atrocities, the question that I want to ask our audience here and online is, what do we do about it? In this particular context, as I mentioned and our sisters mentioned, if you are defending the rights of many people, you will be threatened. If you're asking for your sovereign rights, for your language, for the protection of your people, why are nation states so afraid that they will use the most violent force, whether it's in Burma, in Manipur, in Afghanistan, in Ethiopia, in Sudan, anywhere in the world, even here? I always say nation building has to be done with a lot of love and not at gunpoint. So for some of us here who are living in exile, we did this work because we sensed something was not right in our own communities. I wanted to be a physicist, but when I saw my 14-year-old niece died in a bomb blast in Manipur, when my own parents were nearly shot dead, and no human rights groups worth the name was able to protect me and my family, I realized something is terribly wrong. By the way, many human rights organizations in the world should be renamed as human rights documentation centers, because we love them for the documentation. But when it comes to protecting lives on the ground, like what YYNU and Sister Jamila is doing, there are very few of us. But I'm also extremely grateful that even after we exiled, like as our sisters have shared, I'm so deeply grateful, and I was not aware of it, that there's a whole community of defenders of these rights that I found also here coming. When I first landed here and started to see how can we survive this violence in our communities and stay alive to be able to do this work, I'm extremely grateful, first of all, to the libraries of the United States. The reason is they became the living rooms, I call them living rooms of America. Because when I did not know there was a world of community to help me, the libraries of New York City became the spaces where you could sit, you could relax, you could get a card and borrow 100 books without paying 1 cent. There are many things that we are upset here in this country, but there are many things that we have forgotten. That was one thing. Second, meeting people at the IIE, Institute of International Education. We are at the Institute of Education here, and I think really grateful to some of the educational efforts that has been made, which allowed some of us to become fellows and to be embedded in a community or an institution. Because when I came first without any support, we did not know there's a world of support out there, because not everybody is aware of this knowledge. A lot of people asked me I could sell wigs in a Korean store. I could help people, old people, again, because you don't have the visa, that it could be paid under the table. I was losing our dignity, our humanity, like Sister S said. But when IIE stepped in, I felt it was a blessing from the sky. I was able to teach a course in Connecticut College called Women, War and Peace, based on 15 years of work that we did in Manipur, northeast of India, and the Indo-Burma border for the last 15 years. I turned those 15 years into a curriculum and taught it. The second thing which also happened was entering the office, meeting Zersik Spencer, who's right here, and walking into the office of National Endowment for Democracy, and truly coming from the world's largest democracy, where democracy is practiced in name. I walk into an institution where real democracy, the spirit of democracy, was put alive. For me, walking into the NED's old office, for me, awakened me to see that how people are working consciously through every ways. So my experience with that, and most importantly, Cheryl, who is not here, from Freedom House, again, never heard of Freedom House when I was in India, but the way in which individuals like Cheryl from Freedom House stood by many of us and said, "You're not alone in what you're going through," was one of the greatest responses of humanity that I've ever felt in this country. Scholar Rescue Fund, I never knew those kind of institutions existed. So I think this is something that we can, and the support that McCain and Berivan at that critical time gave to us, to be known as a Democrat at risk. To be given a title like this for is like a dream come true. Democrats at risk. People working day in and out to defend the human freedom in our nations, in our countries. I saw it here. And when I return, I will take it back and seed it more in our nations when things are better. But are things better? No. Things have become worsened than we ever are. This will be the darkest Christmas for us. This year, the Manipuri people did not celebrate any festival because of the killings which went on. I am from the Indo-Burma border. The borders of these two beautiful regions of the world were separated by colonial boundary making who did not understand us. We have people living in the northeast of India. We have people living on the Burma side. Yet nation states divided us. And as a result, after the Burmese conflict, the military crackdown and the destroying of democracy in 2021, when a lot of pro-democracy forces came to Manipur and the northeast of India, the government of India, which has not signed the Refugee Convention, tried to push you back. It created a fear in the minds of many in India saying, these are illegal migrants, they should be pushed back. We have destroyed our humanity in that part of the world, that now the indigenous communities are now killing each other. I'm not going to name any of these groups because I love them all. But yet, nation states have, and I name all of them, China, India, many other nation states who are involved in that particular part of the world have destroyed the lives of 100 million, 100 million, 60 million in your region, and 45 million in the northeast of India. They are now made to fight with each other. That right now, not human rights, but now so many of our ethnic people are armed to the teeth. Atrocities of the worst form, beheadings, mass massacres have become normalized this year in my land. And this for us is unacceptable. That's why for many of us who are here, our bodies are here, but our mind and souls are back home with us. And we will not rest till we seek accountability, ensure rule of law, because it's being violated every single day. And as I mentioned, because some conflicts in the world are known and reported, discussed, debated, and resolution passed, at least some of the world's conflicts that are known, you have support. But for 300 other unreported conflicts, where will that support come? Until today, this has not been answered by anyone that I know. And we will continue to see, because we know that unless we help each other, one another, like through different communities, and most critically, as I mentioned, that some of the, I would like, in spite of the pain in the voice that you're hearing from me, I'm also a person of great hope. I believe in the stubbornness of resilience, of love, of humanity. And I would like to end with this note, that what could be done and what should be done. Currently, there are 72 armed insurgent groups in my region. More and more weapons flooded into my region to fight wars, conflicts. Some call it defending your rights, some call it protecting one region, one religion, one community. Are we going to continue this whole militarization and weaponization of our life and identity? Is a question, whether it's Burma, Afghanistan, or Manipur. We are at a critical time. We cannot live when the children of others are killed, right? When the mothers, when the brothers, the young men killed in the Chin state. And I know my brother is here from the Chin state. When our young men are killed in the Chin state, or in Manipur, or whether in Afghanistan or in the Rohingya region. This is unacceptable. So I feel that we need a collective energy at this moment in our life, in our history, that if we do not turn this around, we are going to cease as one humanity. And I would like to say we have to need to work together, not in silos, but connecting these different conflict areas and seeing what are the issues. Because every community deserves to live. They need to ensure that their rights, their history, their way of life, and their sovereign rights are protected. But right now, they are being turned against each other. So I would like to end. Yes, and our moderator has received I can see that. But again, just to share that in all of these struggles, what we have seen in whether we're here or there is the resilience of indigenous women rights defenders. We have to protect them more. We have to ensure that they are given the support and the strength that they need to do this work. So I will end that next year we are going to have a global summit of indigenous peace builders. Just to let you know that we are on the task, that indigenous people, 500 million in 90 countries, and know what is genocide. But yet they survived and continue to remain the strength, the light, and the needed healing that the world deserves. So let us join hands and let's continue to get through 2024 with exiles like ours and exiles like yourselves. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I could not think of a better grounding to the second panel this afternoon, which we'll get into more of how, as a community, we are supporting the movements. But in particular, I want to thank you all. And Bina, your comments at the end, I think really emphasize you cannot separate the activists from the movements. The idea of relocation and safety as being somehow separate from the work that people are doing on the ground is something that I think we have to be prepared to completely jettison. We need to think about this as being a part of human rights movements more broadly. And so just quickly, because we are getting close to the end of our time, some of the things I'm hearing from you all that were part of these journeys, you all are survivors, you are powerful, you're continuing your work despite all of these challenges. And what I'm hearing is that where that's going well, you've had access to networks of people who had access to funds, who had access to fellowships, flexible, rapid visas that allowed you to get somewhere where you could make those critical next steps. So I think that's something we're hearing very clearly, the role that has played. I'm also hearing a lot around digital security needs and that those needs do not end when you leave your country. And we have heard recently in this country a lot about transnational repression. And I think we're definitely hearing that in some of your comments, that the retaliation is global at this point, the potential for reprisals. Also the ability to bring families with you. I know this has been an issue for some defenders, depending on, again, what's the most rapid way to get somebody to safety. It may not be a visa that allows them to bring their family. It may not be a visa that allows them to continue their work. And we need to think through that when we're setting in place these schemes. And then also I want to flag the ability to continue your work. You were getting an LLM, trying to find the support you needed to continue your work, but also to stay here, to access legal resources, legal status. So it sounds as if your work was already difficult for many reasons, but that once you were here, it continued to be difficult. It continued to be hard to find resources. And again, that the network was the place that happened. And so I think it's a really good segue into, I know, this afternoon's panel, which we'll get into. What are some of those protection mechanisms we have? Where can they be strengthened? And I know we're all very interested in what we can do as, for me, lawyers, but also those of us who are doing rapid response through funds, thinking through the role of institutions. And I do think something else that came out clearly is that not only relocating, but the institutions that welcomed you played a key role then in your ability to continue your work and to have the legitimacy and the credibility that you need to then continue that conversation. I think that came out very clearly in all of your comments. I want to say a huge thank you for sharing so much with all of us. That's something we take very seriously, and I know is why we're going to keep this conversation going. I really do want to see if anybody else has another question before we break. It's a lot to digest. Yes, do you all have thoughts now?
Yeah, I mean, if there's no question, I see there if there's a real intention to support the human rights defenders, there are three ways, and many of you are taking part in different level right now. But I want to highlight three ways to support the human rights defenders. One, for their safety, protections, from the legal status to mental, physical health, and financial safety and protection. Two, creating an enabling environment that they can continue to pursue their visions and their mission, continue to work. A lot of the time, as Sister Jamila was mentioning, a lot of the human rights defenders had to give up on their visions and their passions because they need to survive. So how do we create an environment that allow them to be able to continue their visions and passions in their work? So that's the second part to support. Second part to support the human rights defender. Lastly, supporting, helping them change the country's problem, the root causes, right? Sister Bina was saying about this, highlighting about this. We will not be able to stop human rights defenders being exiled, forced to flee, or struggle of the human rights defenders unless we help address their problems that they face in Burma or in India or in Afghanistan or elsewhere. The root causes of these conflicts need to be addressed, and you can be part of it by advocating to your government. And as Sister Bina said, there are so many crises that the international community has not been paying attention to, or hindering, or undermining, or not basically taking actions. There's no political will to address, and we need that political will to be galvanized, to be activated for the crises to end, so that we can end the struggle and suffering of the human rights defenders, as well as protect life of the people around the world. If you don't support our cause and the work, our advocacy, if you don't help our visions for our country, then whatever you help, it will always be temporary. And it will not address our issue. Our issue, as Sister Bina said, we're not fighting for our personal gain or our personal existence, but we're fighting for the greater cause in our society, in our country, right? And if you really want to help us, you need to help us with our greater cause, listening to our voices. What are we talking about? Our visions for our countries, for our society, and you need to accept those calls and basically help us achieve that, so that it's mean you're really helping our visions and the human rights defenders themselves. Thank you. And again, since I'm here at the McCain Institute, I'd like to shout out all the support that you've provided to the human rights defenders like us, and National Endowment for Democracy, Zaxis Creating Fellowship Program, and many others institutes that I have been able to part of. I'm so grateful for all your support. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you.
Well, always I'm asking myself, and you might ask this question from yourself as well, that so many good people, committed, honest, respecting human rights, people are around the world, but we are unable to overcome a few bad boys who are taking political positions, power in their hand, and destroying our life. And this is very, very dangerous for each and everybody of us, that right now so many conflicts are going on. We can see that what's going on in Gaza, what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on in Afghanistan, Burma, this, that, so many. We are dooming ourselves. We have to make ourselves aware of the reality that today our world is facing. The flood of human rights defenders are coming. How many need support? Why we are not going back to the root causes of the problem? Why we are not putting pressure to eliminate the root causes of the problem? Otherwise, today is one Jamila here, tomorrow there will be 1,000 Jamila. Today is one sister from Burma, from other countries, but there will be thousands are coming. How we should deal with this flood of challenges are coming to us. It needs really deep thinking and critical steps needed to be taken. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I think
Yes.
very
My
final thought, because
yes,
we are
final.
way past time.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Moderator. All right, my final points are this. Conflicts is profitable for some. And Gandhi said there's enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. We have to change the way we look at life and do our policies and our politics. So many people benefited from the wars that is fought over our lands. We have to say this needs to stop, invest more in what humanity needs, on love, care, on taking care of each other. It may sound utopian, and again, as Sister Jamila said, that we cannot let our countries, our regions, and our communities be controlled by a few who have engineered wars and conflicts on our regions, in our territories, in the name of our people, our religion, our communities, and our nation. We will stand resolute against those who will divide us. And so in the process of working towards ensuring that 12 million people who are displaced, not just 3 of us, but 12 million are able to return home one day, because we all want to go home. For Christmas, for New Year, we all want to go home. 80% of those who are in exile, they return home. We want to go home, and help us go home. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I believe now we get a break. Yes? Okay. Thank you all. And we have one final round of applause. Thank you very much. Oh, thank you.
Okay. So we think this is good?
Yeah, that should be good. And I'll raise the volume.
Well done.
Loudspeaker about.
Are you staying for the second? Yes. Okay. Solidarity, solidarity.
Are you going to do an intro? Just a real quick. Oh, you want to hold it?
Yeah, just easier. Then I can mention this.
Great job wrapping it up.
Hi, how are you? Hi, Prof. How are you? Nice to meet you. Yes, good. Yes. Okay. Okay. Yes. Okay.
Okay, the best thing.
Nice to meet you. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was great. They're amazing. I know. I think it's hopefully it was No. I'm gonna try to be a little bit tougher.
They can, I think, go for.
Okay. Thank you. And I would have just said,
Let them just stop because Charlotte has a hard stop. So, yeah, so we need to go to the second panel, on the third panel.
Okay. Hello again. We're just going to move on to our next panel after that very inspiring panel from our defenders. So if we could have the next panel arrive up here. I'll do a quick introduction. Yeah. But I just want to thank our first panel, Jinnah from American Bar Association, and Weiwei, and Jamila, and Bina for their inspiring words. I think it sets us up nicely for our next panel of people who know the issues very well, but who are very supportive of human rights defenders around the world. They come from organizations like the International Women's Foundation, from Freedom House, from National Endowment for Democracy and Open Society, for who, each of these organizations we've had partnerships for many years, and to Open Society, who make a lot of our work even happen. So we're grateful for the support, for the partnerships, because I think you heard from the defenders, from Bina, from Weiwei, from Jamila. We're a connected world, and we rely on each other for support, and whether that's physical, mental support, health support. So I want to turn it over to Nadine Hoffman from the International Women's Foundation. She'll go through a quick round of introductions of our next panel. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate the kind introduction. And just a thank you to the McCain Institute. We have been longtime partners, and a special thank you to Baravan for organizing today's discussion. We're really lucky to have this partnership. I'm Nadine Hoffman. I'm the Deputy Executive Director at the International Women's Media Foundation. So just to add that it is focused on journalism, and I know we're here to talk about human rights defenders, but we do want to broaden that lens out a little bit today. And joined by some really fantastic panelists. And I'm going to be a little bit of a tough moderator because I know we want to keep on time today. But just to give a quick round of introductions, to my left, I have Gerardo Berthen, the Vice President of International Programs at Freedom House. And then next to him is Xerxes Spencer, the Director of Fellowship Programs at the National Endowment for Democracy. And last but not least is Sarah Margan, the Director of Foreign Policy at Open Society US. And so our task today is really to talk about the support network that does exist and where there are gaps in that network for human rights defenders, journalists in exile, and what ideas we can come up with together to strengthen and scale the support that is out there for these incredible women today, but also thousands of others like them, as we've heard. Obviously, this is a growing problem from not just from any particular region, but from every corner of the world. We're seeing more and more brave defenders going into exile. So I want to start off today with you, Gerardo, just to sort of paint the picture for us. We've heard individual testimonies, but at the global scale, and you've been doing this work now for decades, can you tell me a little bit about what you've seen changing in this landscape of the need for people to go into exile, any specific trends, and what you think is causing this increase?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you to the McCain Institute for this invitation, and I'm really honored to be part of this panel, and hard to follow the previous panel, very powerful, and certainly it reflects really a lot of the dimensions, not only the human dimensions, but the other dimensions of being a human rights defender. You're right. I mean, Freedom House has been doing this work for a number of years, and we're still learning. We're still learning basically to support human rights defenders and a new phenomenon of a new community, which is the human rights defenders in exile. It is a much more complex landscape, I would say, that we have today than 20 years ago. Certainly, we have several instruments and mechanisms to provide short-term protection or emergency protection. But as you heard directly from some of the human rights defenders, there are other issues which are still evolving, I would say. More medium-term assistance, for example, even long-term assistance, the issue of families coming into the mix, whether it's temporary relocation. Also, I think the number of actors that are involved in the protection of human rights defenders has expanded. In addition to local organizations, there are governments now, particularly in friendly environments, as well as the private sector who have offered support and means and resources to support human rights defenders. There are several intersections also that are changing. The human rights defenders are not certainly a homogeneous or monolithic group. There are a lot of intersections which I think the mechanisms and the protection programs are just beginning to kind of understand how to best provide that support, and we're still learning on that. Someone mentioned in the previous panel that the landscape also has gone online, has gone in the cyberspace, whereas maybe 20 years ago that wasn't really an issue. Today, governments and also even social platforms, private companies are now part of that problem on the one hand, but also the solution. And certainly, there are some issues regarding protection, private information actually can go online, disinformation, and all other types of tools that whoever wants to use artificial intelligence or technology in a bad way can be very creative to actually do a lot of harm. I will end just with one other dimension that we're seeing, and I think Freedom House is leading in this area, which is the transnationality of the human rights defender issue. For example, we just put together a couple of days ago a report on transnational repression on journalists, and we're working one on universities, which will come fairly soon. And what we're seeing is basically that borders, physical borders, are no longer a deterrent for bad actors to actually cause harm, even when human rights defenders actually have, found some way of protecting themselves. And this is an issue that is bringing together some of the most authoritarian minds in the world to work together, to collaborate, to exchange information in a way basically that causes, as I said, the most damaging, not only to the human rights defenders, but organizations that actually can work. Suffice to say that we work for the human rights defenders, wherever they are relocated, particularly outside their countries, for them to continue the work of human rights. They bring a lot of experience, as we were able to see in the last panel. They bring a lot of passion. They bring a lot of resources in terms of knowledge and strategies. And that is a challenge, actually, because sometimes, depending on where they are relocated, they can either continue their work or maybe they cannot. And certainly we want to make sure that they do, because in addition to returning to their homelands, we also want them to continue to be a force to bring these issues to the attention, these invisible issues that they were talking about in the previous panel. A lot of the people who bring those issues are precisely the human rights defenders, and they're the best indicated individuals to do that because they are living that every day together. So I will stop here just to give the context, but I hope I provided sufficient input so we can generate a good discussion there.
Thank you. I think that's a perfect segue. And I just want to turn back to something Jamila said in her testimony about really when she arrived, starting from zero, and this feeling of having to rebuild everything. And where my organization comes in is sort of at that getting someone to zero. We work with the Journalist in Distress Network, and we are doing the emergency assistance to just get people out of danger and to a safe place. And then when they get there, we look to the medium and longer term support organizations and what can be possible so that they can continue to make those valuable contributions. So I want to turn with that in mind to you, Xerxes, just to tell us a little bit about the model of fellowship programs that you've developed to support these incredible individuals, and also the efforts that you're developing now just to scale those fellowships, because as we have heard today, we are seeing just thousands of people in this situation. So how we are able to maybe bring in more partners and more stakeholders to share this work.
Thank you, Nadine, and thank you to Baravan, Paul, the McCain Institute, for inviting me to this very important conversation. So as Nadine has mentioned, I'm the Director of Fellowships at the National Endowment for Democracy. The Reagan Fussell Democracy Fellows Program was founded in 2001 to bring frontline defenders of democracy, human rights activists, journalists, scholars, civil society leaders, artists, and others working to advance freedom, giving them the opportunity to come for 5 or more months to be in residence at NED, to participate in an international exchange experience, sharing their stories of struggle, strength, learning from one another, broadening their networks, and situating their work in a broader comparative context, because the struggles for freedom in Afghanistan relate to the struggles for freedom in Sudan or Russia or Nicaragua or elsewhere across the globe. At its inception, the Fellows Program was intended simply to be this period of reflection, recharging of batteries, exchange, with the idea that fellows would go back home, and most of them do go back home with new insights, best practices that they apply to their countries and communities. What we found, however, with each passing year, and the scale has now escalated to the current moment, following the backlash after the Arab Spring, the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and all the crises we see in all the different countries across the globe, that the scale has transformed from what once was episodic and occasional to a floodgate of folks coming into exile. So we have been seeking to adapt and innovate in response to this transformation. I think as part of the international community, we have a moral obligation to stand in support of brave women and men like yourselves. But it's also there is a strategic imperative for us to be standing in support of individuals like we heard and those in this room and online. And that strategic imperative is that the anti-democratic, autocratic forces out there are seeking to cleanse their societies of these brave individuals. Those of us who are part of the democratic world, the international community, it's in our strategic interest to partner with them because you represent a viable, meaningful, democratic alternative to those forces out there. So there is a moral as well as a strategic imperative. With that in mind, we've come in recent years to offer what we call expedited or emergency fellowships to those individuals, and we define democracy advocates and human rights defenders very broadly to include journalists, public intellectuals, artists, lawyers, religious advocates, people from all different professions who in their own disciplines may be working to advance the sphere of freedom. We are affording them what we call expedited or emergency fellowships if a crisis compels them to leave Afghanistan, Russia, Venezuela, Sudan, Pakistan, wherever, to come to DC if we have the capacity to welcome them, to offer them mentoring, guidance, financial support, psychosocial, health insurance, a whole comprehensive menu of support services for 6 months, for 8 months, for 12 months. And in recent times, as an outgrowth of that residential fellows program that we host at NED, we've come to cultivate connections with like-minded institutions like the Center for Human Rights at ABA, CSIS, universities like Georgetown, building bridges from what we consider medium-term support, which our fellowships are for a 5, 6, 7, 12-month period, building bridges towards long-term support and sustainability. So if it's too unsafe to go back to Afghanistan or wherever you may be from, how can this incredibly talented individual carry on their incredible work in support of human rights and democracy from afar, from a safe distance? With a small fund raised with private funds, the Carl Gershman Fund for Democracy Advocates at Risk, we've begun this pilot effort to co-sponsor fellowships at other sites of activity, at other institutions, including Georgetown Law School. We'll be partnering with Georgetown Law School starting in January in support of an Afghan human rights defender. And we've begun to seed such partnerships with think tanks, with universities, with organizations, the Due Process of Law Foundation in support of a Guatemalan attorney. And the idea there is to invite individuals, institutions, and sectors of society that may not otherwise see themselves as potential hosts for people like Jamila, Weiwei Bina, Bassam from Syria is in the room. He's a fellow of ours. Marvi from Pakistan is a human rights defender, also a former fellow. When it's too unsafe to go back to Syria, to Pakistan, how can they carry on their incredible human rights work from a safe distance? Could a university see itself as a place of welcome? Could a think tank see itself as a place of welcome? If you're a journalist at risk and looking towards long-term in exile, could the media sector in the United States and Canada, Europe, whatever the region of relocation and resettlement may be, how can that media sector open its doors to you? Could it be through fellowships? Could it be through consultancies, short-term professional opportunities, or even speaking engagements? Because these are not simply favors that we are extending as host institutions, but it's incredible talent that brave women and men bring to these host institutions that enable them to carry on their work in a way that is mutually beneficial. If you're faculty, these individuals bring frontline insights into what it means to be advocating for human rights on the ground in the countries across the globe that they represent. And so they enrich, inspire classroom discussion, and they put a human face to what might otherwise be academic or theoretical discussions on the topic. So there are ways in which that argument can and ought to be made. And part of that argument is to say to universities, to the media sector, to the legal profession, that here are individuals who are putting their lives and livelihoods on the line for the very values that underpin your university, your media outlet, your legal institution, or whatever institution you may belong to. What better way to stand up to those values than to welcome them, to tap into their expertise in ways that are mutually beneficial. So we've begun cultivating these co-sponsorships. I think there is merit and potential to scaling that up, but so much more could and should be done on the part of these sectors of society in countries of resettlement to welcome talented professionals like the ones we've heard from and elsewhere across the globe. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Xerxes. So turning to you, Sarah, I would love to have you share from your perspective as someone who is sitting in a funder role, but also, someone who has done a lot of work in the human rights sector and has government experience as well. First of all, some things that you've seen that you think are particularly effective and working to support the needs of human rights defenders in exile, and also some of the things that you think just really need, a greater investment to be able to scale up.
Thanks, Nadine. And is this on? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Nadine. Thanks to the McCain Institute for having this conversation, and thanks to the women on the panel before. I think we sort of pale in comparison to the strength and thoughtfulness of what you all have shared, but still happy to be here to pull back maybe 50,000 foot and think a little bit bigger. So I have worked in this field for a long time and have worked with a lot of people that are no longer in their home countries, sometimes by choice, sometimes not. And I do think that's an important difference that needs to be considered, because if you leave by choice because you don't feel safe, but are not necessarily banned or exiled, there may be an opportunity to return. Whereas if you are forced to be exiled, or if you are actually evacuated because of a conflict or a crisis, the game changes a little bit in terms of your ability to go back. And I think, in my 4.5 years at Open Society Foundation, we have done emergency evacuation for partners and grantees from Burma, Ukraine, Belarus, Nicaragua, Afghanistan, and it's ongoing. And these are all things you could, in a sense, see coming down the pike. Iran, you could see this coming down the pike, and yet we were still, as a larger community, I think, caught in an emergent crush of need almost annually or biannually for these very large groups of people who had been partners, thinkers, allies, advocates, and change makers alongside sometimes U.S. government, other governments, and really at the front end of the work, the frontliners. And so, to me, thinking about how we do better in planning goes a little bit to something that sounds perhaps simple, but it's the mitigation and the preparedness of the pre-work, right? How do we avoid these consistent emergency situations? A lot of that has to do with strengthening our mechanisms for working on democracy, the rule of law, and human rights. There is a lot of money Congress is spending right now to support human rights and democracy. But how do we ensure as a broad community that this work is more effective so that we aren't evacuating or creating space for longer term exiles? That seems one. That may not be easy, but I think about a colleague and partner in Hungary, and how they've talked a lot about the need, God bless you, for continued engagement at a time when Hungary may not seem like it's in the same level of crisis as Burma or Afghanistan. So those countries in the middle that could fall in the wrong direction, how do we continue to support those defenders and those communities, not just as individuals, but to support their institutional work, to make sure that they have opportunities for connection. I hear this a lot when it comes to organizations in India who feel like because information may not be getting out in the same way, that they're losing connection to the international community. And here I don't just mean Western governments, right? But to multilateral mechanisms. So strengthening those mechanisms so we aren't caught unaware at a time when there is crisis and can potentially push back on the crisis, I think may help the need to strengthen some of the mechanisms for exiles, even though the work is so important and so incredible. I also have been thinking a lot about the mechanisms that exist when it comes to general migratory patterns. We are in an environment where people are on the move very regularly. So yes, in some cases it is because of growing autocracy, but it's also because of economic opportunity. And I think about the legal mechanisms that we have here in the United States to bring people to the United States, and to put it simply, sort of the messiness that exists for people who are trying to immigrate to the United States and the visa backlog. But I also think about how hard it has become for human rights defenders simply trying to come to the United States to get a visa. And the process, everybody needs an expedited visa. Suddenly, everybody needs to know somebody in Washington that can push the State Department, who is trying to do the best they can, but simply don't have enough resources to move visas in a quick way. So if that's the situation for individuals who are trying to come here, let's say for a quick visit, what can we be doing to expedite the potential for those who need support in a more emergency situation? Afghanistan is perhaps the most extreme example of that situation, one I hope we never, ever have to see again. But we were ill prepared for that in a very serious way. And a lot of that was because it got tangled up in our own immigration situation. And Congress, half was trying to be very helpful and half was trying to be very unhelpful. And so we were a bit stuck. But that brings me to a point I wanted, sort of thinking about a constructive solution, which is, you may all know the organization Welcome US, which does incredible work on private sponsorship, bringing people to the United States. I wonder what private sponsorship avenues we can start thinking about to generate more support for human rights exiles. So, okay, they get a fellowship at NED or through one of the universities for a year, but what kind of additional support can they have to ensure that they aren't sort of left languishing, accessing community, accessing basic needs, feeling that they're included as they shift to society that is not their own? I know when the Burma coup happened, there were a lot of Burmese who had spent time in the US after the 1988 coup and then gone back to Burma recently. And so they had some networks. Not every other community is so lucky. And still, it was a different group. It was in some cases a younger group. And it is tiring, and there is trauma, and there is a need for continued ongoing support, not just 6 months after you get here, right? But like a year and 2 years and regularized check-ins. So I think a lot about what private Americans can do if our society across from coast to coast is really founded on this model of immigration and refugees. This is sort of, in many cases, what underpins who we are and the best of who we are. Mm-hmm. It is that welcoming idea, not just to people who are coming here to flee something economically or flee a crisis, but also who bring an add to the community and have these extraordinary ideas that can then connect back to the community. So the last point I want to make here is the digital security piece, right? And I think this is really important because of the growing transnational repression. We've seen this across the board with a number of countries at this point, and it's very concerning. But one of the things that I've always been really struck by is making sure that people who have an opportunity to come here, even in exile, are not disconnected in any way from their community. And that requires both smart digital technology, but also savvy digital technology. Mm-hmm. And what steps are we taking as, whether it's philanthropy or the government, to ensure the security of shared information? When I used to work at Human Rights Watch, we would gather so much information on Syria from people who had fled the country but had access to that digital information and were able to share it with us in a credible way, so we could not just document, but then also do the policy work to try to make the situation better. Clearly, more work needs to be done there. But in working with those exiled human rights defenders, we need to make sure that when they are able to access information, the people they're getting it from are not under threat, in the same way that we would have made sure they were not under threat and are not under threat here, given those transnational border issues. So that's just the last piece I think needs more thought as technology continues to develop and evolve. And it's incumbent upon us to include that in our thinking when we think about technological development. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you. You've surfaced a lot of issues that I think we could have a separate panel on each of those issues. But what I really want to do is turn to the three panelists and just ask, do you think we're meeting the moment? And if not, what are the things that we could be doing better? You've already offered some constructive solutions to meet this probably unprecedented moment that we are living through right now, in terms of the number of people who need safe spaces from the work that has brought them here to the US or other countries. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I am seeing that you have the microphone.
Sure. So. Thank you. No, building on what has been said, I think that there is, as I mentioned, a complexity actually in the landscape of human rights defenders. I think those who come to the US and Canada probably can consider themselves very lucky, because there are other places that are not, basically, with all of the problems that we have here in the US, they're not as friendly. They don't have specific visas. There is no particular, let's say, short line in the huge line of refugees for human rights defenders. This is one of the things that there were discussions in the US, for example, to create a specific human rights defenders visa, because how do you distinguish basic? Everybody's trying to flee some sort of a danger, but how do we distinguish within the let's say, the group, the human rights defenders that we can help? I think also that the different phases, basically, of assistance to human rights defenders is something that probably we need to work a little bit more. Sometimes we only focus on the emergency and the urgency, but we don't kind of dwell in the other phases, which are a bit more complex because they require other types of interventions once the human rights defenders are let's say, assisted at first. That is the part probably that has the less visibility, and I'm very glad that in the former panel, one of my colleagues was mentioned, Cheryl, in a sense. Their work sometimes is not visible, yet they are at the front line doing the first, let's say, work in this cycle of assistance. There are some countries in which basically we cannot actually even travel because we will probably be put in jail in a sense, right? So that is another issue that I want to kind of talk about. Also, in terms of the digital security, which is certainly a tremendous concern. Particularly, I think we at Freedom House, we make a very clear distinction between closed societies and closing societies. I think they're two concepts that are a bit different. Closed societies are, for example, I'm going to use some examples. I mean, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela were very much, and others, very much where the governments have tools to actually interpret infringements of violations of what they can consider basically defamation, terrorism, money laundering, and so forth and so on. And so any type of digital solution that we can bring doesn't really help in that particular situation. Probably it's much more relevant in the closing environments. And again, as Freedom House, we managed for a number of years a human rights support mechanism, and we're putting together some policy briefs, so we have lessons to learn about how to actually work issues of digital security. Last but not least, I would also focus on the fact that certainly journalists in particular are a group that have been targeted and continue to be targeted because they are the bridge between the information that we can get, particularly in the closed societies. And certainly, even when they are safe somewhere else, we found evidence that they continue to be, as some of the other panelists mentioned, they continue to be harassed, they continue to be intimidated. In some cases, which is the extreme case like Khashoggi, basically going to an embassy and not coming alive in a sense, right? So that is a particular challenge that we need to work. And I like the former panel in terms of packaging the issue of human rights defenders as we, right? And I think here in the panel, I mean, all the three organizations that are represented here have worked together in one way or another, and that's another way that we could actually provide not only collective solutions, but also shared solutions to the large complexity of the problem that we have at hand. I will leave it there. Yeah.
Thank you. Sarah.
Thanks. I'll be brief. You asked if we're meeting the moment. I don't think we are. No. But I don't think it's our fault. I think the situation for human rights defenders right now is so fluid and evolving, and the needs can't respond when things are moving so quickly. What we need are not just multiple mechanisms to provide support, but both short, medium, and longer term, and this has come up repeatedly. I think we're pretty good at the emergency need. We sort of all pull together, we find the thing that needs to get done, whether it's evacuation or support or cross-border vehicles. And we do it from funder to frontline groups to the journalists who come and make sure that they're there and sort of share information. It's the mid and longer term support coupled with psychosocial support, I think, that is really, really missing and would really help develop and strengthen the community's work so that we can continue doing the human rights work that they are so passionate about, even if it's from a distance. But I also think we need to be creative about how we engage. Leveraging government money is a lot more effective than foundations continuing to play this role. If the Soros Foundation gives between $700,000 and $3.5 million a year globally in support of human rights defenders, that's not chump change, but it's not enough, right? And it's a little bit of a niche market on an issue that is increasingly a broad-based issue that requires more engagement. And so I think there are a lot of governments that can be working together in a more coordinated fashion. I think there may be reason to think about exiles leaving their home country and being closer to home, at least within the region, if that's what they want to do, and providing support even if it comes from other governments. And I think we need to be doing some scenario planning for what comes next. Obviously, there's a lot going to be going on in this country in 2024. And as I think about where the rest of the world is and what the rest of the world looks like, to think of the US as either a non-factor or a harmful factor in 2025 really I think will have a ripple effect on support for human rights defenders and certainly for exiles.
Well, that is a little bit dark. I do want to just touch on the point about psychosocial support because it also came up in the first panel. And just if there are any sort of models that you could point to that have been effective of offering that kind of support, if any of you are familiar with good models of psychosocial support.
There are a few organizations. There's a lot more that can and should be done for psychosocial care, but there are organizations such as Open Briefing based in the United Kingdom that provides virtual psychosocial support, counseling to human rights defenders at risk across the globe. They also provide digital security, but so much more can and should be done at the global level, but at the local level, wherever the human rights defenders happen to have resettled. I simply wanted to point to another dimension, which is the diaspora communities and the role that they could and perhaps should play. So if you're a Burmese women's rights defender in the United States, to what extent can the Burmese diaspora, who has perhaps been here for a longer period, welcome you, help you acclimate to life in the United States? What can the more established exiles offer to the newcomers from that same country or region? Because obviously there are cultural, linguistic affinities that you share. And then similarly, but in a distinct fashion, if you're a women's rights defender from Afghanistan, from Burma, from India, from Pakistan, from Syria, and you are all now in the United States, how can you forge a sisterhood focusing on the struggles of women's rights defenders in exile? If you're journalists from Nicaragua, from Russia, from Cuba, from Syria, wherever, how can journalists from across the globe now in exile forge alliances with one another, learn from one another? Some of them may want to set up exile media outlets where they happen to be. Others have found ways to gain full-time employment within the media sector. So how can they share those practical tips with one another, but also how can they deepen solidarity, which is ultimately the most meaningful, that they are not alone, they're not starting from scratch, they're not doing this for the first time, that they are part of a welcoming community. It's something to think about, and the agency should come from, I feel, the exile defenders themselves, certainly in partnership with others in the diaspora, others in the community of welcome, but seeing them lead that effort also makes sense to me.
I want to also just come back to this point about collaboration and how we were more effective when we work together, because you're now bringing in other stakeholders from other sectors to try to spearhead this sort of co-sponsorship model. So what would you say, like what are the key elements of making collaboration more effective, not just within this sector directly, but so we can bring in more?
Well,
more
you need
stakeholders?
kindred spirits. You need a like-minded partner at the host institutions who can see the value in welcoming that individual and seeing what added value they would bring to the center, the institute, the university, the media sector that they may become affiliated with. You need that kindred spirit or several kindred spirits to start knocking on doors to unlock funds. There may be private philanthropists that could underwrite these co-sponsored fellowships, but if the host institution can ultimately dedicate some of their own budget towards it, obviously we need the financial support to sustain that effort for a medium to long term. You need the legal support from the country that they are in to ensure that they have the appropriate legal immigration status to earn a living. Those are all key to making this sustainable over the long haul.
Thank you. Yes, please jump in. And then Sarah, I see you as
Yes,
well.
if I can add just on the psychosocial issue, which is related to what you were saying, I think working with the Exile human rights defenders community where they are is very important. In fact, actually, there's no cookie cutter approach to psychosocial support. It is integrated. We know that. It needs to actually cover all of the bases, but it needs to also speak to the context and the local context where they are actually living their daily lives, in a sense. So also there are some resources in some countries which are untapped to help this particular community. What I'm talking about really is the strengthening of an ecosystem, actually, that supports human rights defenders where they are, and it could vary really from country to country. Certainly, it's multi-actor. I think in many countries we need the government support to make sure that basically the bureaucratic work is fast and legal. The private sector, basically for employment. Universities are also a very important actor to provide not only psychological support but other training. So it is multi-dimensional, I would say. Yeah.
Yes, and I'm getting cue cards from the back. So you're going to have final words, and I will take one question from the audience before we wrap it up. So go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to say, I love the idea, the human rights defender visa, the idea of which has been sort of popping around for a while. Obviously, defining what that means is, you know, what a defender is will take some work, but I think it's a tremendously valuable idea. On the flip side, outside the federal government, think a lot about what local government can be doing here to support human rights defenders. You mentioned libraries, right? I love libraries too, and watching libraries evolve into what they have become in the current modern era, given so many people read online. What role can libraries play in providing support platforms for human rights defenders to reach out, access community, share their stories, and gain support? Local governments, mayoral offices are inundated right now with a lot of issues in this country. And obviously immigration is going to continue to be a city-specific situation for many places. But there are other municipal avenues for human rights defenders to be brought into a community, to be given a platform. And to me, there's some really interesting federal, state level, city level collaboration that should be explored further. Thanks.
That's a great idea. Do we have one question from the audience? Please, go ahead, Bina.
Yes, thank you. My question is very simple. A lot of human rights defenders in exile have set up their own local organizations. And I wanted to know, because this is a sense of empowerment for many of them, and I know several of them, but I wanted to know what are organizations, institutions doing about it to strengthen that they're able to support, because what happens is not only the setting up, is also supporting work back home. So I feel it's a very critical tool, and which we must, I feel, put more thoughts in. So I wanted to know if there were any structures set in place, have a discussions around this, because I think these are what I call organic ways of sustainable ability for the exiles. Thank you.
It's an excellent question, Bina, and this is perhaps one way in which the legal profession also could be drawn into this conversation, because lawyers who are equipped with the expertise in the steps it takes to register an organization in the country or city of residence would be equipped to provide that guidance. It's, it varies from city to city, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, the steps you take to legally incorporate your NGO. But if pro bono legal counsel could be afforded, that would be a very practical and meaningful way for you to register your human rights NGO, your media outlet. I'm acquainted with the Vance Center based in New York that does provide pro bono legal counsel to journalists who are seeking to register their media outlet in the United States, and there are other such entities. But cultivating those connections and welcoming lawyers into this conversation who might then dedicate pro bono time to guiding you on those practical steps would be a meaningful step forward.
And if I could add, the short answer is yes, actually. We encourage in our different programs to do that. In fact, actually, there's one step after that, talking about local governments, as Sarah was talking about. In a lot of countries that we worked, the organizations of human rights defenders are also sponsoring national human rights defender laws to actually provide not only the necessary protection in the law, but also government funding actually for these organizations to continue. Obviously, it is not in the closed spaces, it's in the much more kind of democratic spaces, if I can use that. But yes, the short answer is we encourage that model in a way that we think that it is more sustainable actually to, for the program and the resources to expand it.
Well, I think we're going to leave it there. I want to thank this incredible panel for all of the work that you are doing and will continue to do to support human rights defenders in exile. I think we maybe can agree we are not yet meeting the moment, but there are a lot of very smart minds here thinking about the ways that we can, and hopefully this conversation will be continued. Thank you to the McCain Center for hosting us.